On this episode, I have Ron Seitz, the president and CEO of Fighter Country Partnership. Fighter Country Partnership is in close collaboration with Luke Air Force Base. So if you're looking to learn a little bit more as far as what they're doing out there in the West Valley, this is the episode you want to listen to. I wanted to thank my good friend Ron Seitz for joining me today. Ron is actually the president and CEO of Fighter Country Partnership. Ron, would you mind maybe sharing a little bit more about what Fighter Country Partnership is?
How much time do we have? I mean,
we could probably fill the entire podcast with
pretty
that.
Open-ended question right off the bat about what we do. We're a very unique nonprofit that supports an active duty military installation, and we all know and love Luke Air Force Base. So that's the installation that we support. We support it through programs and services. We gear our programs and services through three areas: morale and well-being, culture and tradition, and mission sustainability. And I mean, as we go further in this, conversation we're having right now, I mean, it's the stuff that we're doing now. There's nobody else in the country doing what we're doing at the capacity that we're doing it, and at the levels that we're doing it. I mean, what started as programs and services has now grown to actually building and renovating facilities on an active duty military installation. So. There's a lot to be said, but that's the Cliff Notes.
A lot of people are familiar with Luke Air Force Base, a lot of times because they go out to the air show that the base hosts. But could you maybe share a little bit more as far as how many people are involved out at Luke Air Force Base that are active?
That's the kind of information that I love sharing, is because my job is really just about education and awareness, because most people see the base just like I did 11 years ago before I got involved in this crazy world I'm in now. And what I saw was plane, fence, and pilot. So people don't understand what Luke Air Force Base actually is. They think they do because they watch the news and they read the newspapers. And then when they hear about the information that we share and the level of knowledge that we have from inside the fence, it blows people away. So I love those quant questions. So what is Luke? So the 56th Fighter Wing is about 5,500 airmen, 1,200 civilian employees. You also have the 944th Fighter Wing, which is about 1,200 airmen. You have the Navy on the base, which is a NOSC, a Navy Operational Support Center. So there's 850 sailors in the desert. You also have the Marines on the base. You got 400 Marines and a reserve unit. You add in a small little Army Corps of Engineers. So all those individuals and children and spouses, you got about 20 to 22,000 people who use the base regularly.
22,000 people. That's a lot.
And that doesn't count the retiree population. And that's the one that blows people away and I'm not talking the 14-year vet who did amazing service for our country. To be a retired military representative is 20 years of service typically, if you're not honorably discharged, and different segments like that. But typically it's 20 years of service to retire with benefits and base access. And there's almost 100,000 people who are eligible to drive on the base and go get a flu shot. So it's a huge base.
Yeah, so Luke Air Force Base definitely has a huge impact on our local economy. A lot of those individuals that they're now transitioning into the local workforce, they're working for great companies, some in the West Valley, or they maybe have migrated to other parts of the community. What are some great ways for employers here in town to further engage with those that are transitioning off of the base?
So just outside the fence, there's the West Valley Veteran Success Center, which was established a couple years back. I mean, that's always my first recommendation, is for individuals to definitely get associated with that. It used to be the Northgate Visitor Center. So it's open to the public, so there's public access. So I always encourage individuals and organizations and businesses who are looking to engage with those transitioning airmen to make sure they have a relationship with that West Valley Veteran Success Center.
That's a great idea.
And also, it's like how you've done it and how other individuals have done it, is they've gotten involved with us. They've gotten involved in supporting the base. And as they've gotten involved in supporting the base, then they might become part of an honorary commander program, which gives them deeper knowledge, which really what that does is just put Kool-Aid in the veins on what Luke Air Force Base is. And once you have that knowledge and relationship with the base, that's also where you can get more information about how to get engaged with transitioning airmen and stuff like that.
Could you break down how could the local civilians get further involved with Luke Air Force Base?
So, I mean, I selfishly like to say get involved with us, but I also have to say at the same point we're not a volunteer-driven network. when you're supporting an organization that has an M16 at the front door, we're very sensitive as to who we work with and how we associate with individuals of influence. So we like to do it in small groups. We don't like to do it in big groups. So getting engaged with us and understanding what we do and how we support the base is I selfishly think the best way. Yep. But the Honorary Commander Program is a public affairs Department of Defense driven program, which is really awesome and unique. Every installation in the country has some sort of platform like that, but Luke does it incredibly well. But it's a limited group of individuals that's allowed to go through that program. And so every 2 years, it's a 2-year program. Every 2 years, those individuals go through that Honorary Commander Program, and there's about 65 to 70 individuals that get selected. And there's always 100 to 125 people. So it's a huge opportunity if you get selected to go through it.
But and a huge honor.
A humbling honor. I mean, that's what got me started 11 years ago. That's what got you involved.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So.
No, I can say just from my experience with getting involved with that, I personally didn't have much of a background. I didn't have any family that was in active or former military. And so it was a huge learning opportunity for me. And I didn't realize all the great things that Luke was actually involved with. So I encourage any CEO, executive, if they are personally or professionally looking to get their companies involved with Luke Air Force Base, probably to encourage them to look at your website just to start with. What's your website again? Would you mind sharing that information?
Fightercountry.org.
Pretty easy to remember. So what are some of the other key initiatives? I know you guys host a golf tournament. What are some other opportunities for the local population to get involved with Fighter Country Partnership?
So I will temper it with to get educated on, because again, it's difficult to get involved with the programs and services and stuff that we provide just because most of it's inside the fence. And getting inside the fence of Luke Air Force Base is not easy. And when there's 100 F-35s out at Luke, and you have all those international partners that train out there, again, base access is very, very challenging. So getting educated on what we do. For instance, yesterday we just had our back-to-school bash. And we partnered with a couple other great nonprofits, Back-to-School Clothing Drive, Legacy Foundation. We brought in some amazing nonprofits. USAA was a portion of the volunteer efforts, Fiesta Bowl charities. But in a nutshell, 800 children of the military walked away with backpacks, pair of pants, pair of shorts, sweater, Coyotes tickets. I mean, just amazing opportunity and support for these families out at Luke. I mean, that's just one small example of the things that we're doing. So from an initiative standpoint, it's very important for us to sustain the programs that we have in place around the morale and well-being. So you have monthly deployed family functions. You have finance expos, wellness expos. So while we sustain those programs, we're identifying projects on the base to renovate and build. So a flight line kitchen so that maintainers can have a nice lunch or dinner in an air-conditioned facility when they have to jump off the flight line really fast, get a quick bite to eat, get back out on the flight line. We completed that project not too long ago. Some renovation projects inside of the Child Development Center. Renovated their kitchen, renovated their toddler playing room areas. So those projects are complete. So we have one more project left to complete, which is our Airman Leadership School, which is an amazing project. Once we're done with that project, what begets the completion of the capital campaign starts another capital campaign. So we're working on our next project.
So why is it important for the nonprofit arm to get involved in those capital improvement projects? I mean, doesn't the military have funding for some of their projects on the base?
So this is where I love getting that question because I have multiple analogies for that now. When 5 or 6 years ago, I wasn't armed as well to answer that question because you're like, well, the government, how come they're not doing this, right? So the first analogy I like to share is like when I was bringing my kids to school, first day of elementary school, what was I doing? Both my hands were full of supplies because, the funding base is at its coffers for our school system. What are the parents doing? The parents are supporting it with additional resources. Same thing for our active duty military. And it's no different than our national park system. Look at our national park system and how our national park system is supported. Used to be a federal entity decades ago. How are those big parks getting funded now and supported? Foundations. It's that private nonprofit entity. And it's no different than our cities. Look at our cities. Luke is no different than a normal city. They have amazing, highly sophisticated areas that are critically important to the base. There's also other areas of the base that might not be seen as mission critical, but they need support. That's where we come in. So while you have the academic training center, aircraft maintenance units, $100 million F-35s, training that's critically important to our national defense and global defense. Don't just call it a West Valley asset. It is a global asset. There are dozens and dozens of areas on the base that are identified as non-mission critical areas. Those are the areas that we support.
I think it's amazing how you've been able to kind of bridge the gap for them and make those projects come to life, because I think a lot of them probably would have been put off for a number of years. So kudos to you and your team for making those projects happen.
And it's not even put off. There's no funding for it. And the thing that really is frustrating for us here is for Fighter Country Partnership and Fighter Country Foundation is we feel bad for other installations. Because Luke is so good at engaging with us, people like me and people like you, we understand where their needs are. Because they're not going to ask for help. First and foremost, they're not allowed to. Their job is to train the best F-16 and F-35 pilots and mission-ready warfighters. They're not allowed to ask for, hey, can you renovate our Child Development Center kitchen? But if I understand where some of those needs are, I can ask. So that's what really makes us different.
Since they can't help or they can't ask for that help, I know you're very close to it. Are there any specific elements, goods or services that people in the community could offer up to be of assistance at this point in time?
Well, so you're asking a nonprofit president and CEO about goods and services, and my job's to raise money. So, I mean, it's at the end of the day, that's really what provides us the opportunity to do what we do for Luke Air Force Base. Is we become very good at the programs and services that we provide. We educate our donor base on what we do, and we show them what we do, and we use that outcome to raise more money. And because we become successful, we can identify these larger projects. I mean, our first project was the renovation of a fire station because we had hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting in the bank, and we're not going to sit on our money. We need to spend this money and invest. So we ended up renovating the fire station.
One creative concept that you guys came up with was starting the new license plate program. Could you share a little bit more about the Luke Air Force Base license plate?
Yeah, boy, that was awesome. That was an education in its own right. Senate Bill 1139, I think, going through that whole process. Took about 18 months, but we are just like anybody else, and thank you for bringing that up. I mean, there's so many things that I forget to talk about. Just like the Arizona Coyotes have a license plate, and the Arizona Cardinals have a license plate, and the Arizona Humane Society has a license plate, we have a license plate. It's called the Sound of Freedom. So anybody has the ability to log on to ADOT and go get a Sound of Freedom plate, and they're very unique and very awesome.
And how much of the proceeds from that license plate go directly to Luke Air Force Base?
So it's a $25 fee to get a specialty plate. That's what they're called. $17 comes back to Fighter Country Foundation, and $8 goes back to the state.
I'm sure a lot of people didn't necessarily know that. And I will share, if anybody's in the market for a new license plate, they actually do look pretty cool. I have one on my car myself. So.
And then let me guess, did you personalize yours?
I did, but I probably went over the top. I had to put my call sign on there.
Okay, well, what is it?
Because I went through the honorary commander program with Luke Air Force Base, everybody kind of gives you that nickname. So mine was Mint. So you'll see me driving around town with my Luke Air Force Base license plate that says Mint on it.
Yeah, you just identified yourself. And what's been cool to see is I mean, almost everybody's personalizing these plates. Mine says for LAFB, so for Luke Air Force Base. My wife's is GTMY6, got my 6. It's cool to see all the personalizations out there. And you're only allowed 5 letters, so you got to be creative.
Yes, you definitely do have to. And it's been fun to see because I feel like the people I have seen that have the Luke Air Force Base one, I'll like stop at the stoplight and I'll look and see if I know who's actually sitting in the car. Some of my fellow Blue Blazers, that's happened a couple of times, so that's kind of funny. So maybe if you could share a little bit more about the air show. A lot of people in the community get to know more about Luke Air Force Base by coming onto the base for that. Can you share when it happens, how often it happens, and what people could expect to see if they've never been before?
So the air show happens every other year. I mean, barring any sort of government shutdown or sequestration, which happened once. That was not fun. But so every other year. So it's last year was 2018. So it's upcoming in 2020. I believe it's March 24th and 25th. It's typically in March, second or third week. We try and schedule our dates around the Thunderbirds so that the Thunderbirds can come and fly. And it's funny is, we used to call it Luke's Air Show, but because of how we've grown and how we've become involved with the base, we actually have become partners with that air show. Again, we're running an air show like no other air show has been run in the country. So we partner with Luke Air Force Base through a specialty lease. And so we now pretty much control ground operations. And the base is responsible for air operations. And it's the largest 2-day event in the state of Arizona.
Yeah.
You got the Super Bowl when it comes is the largest 1 day, and the largest 5 days, the Waste Management Phoenix Open. That air show, I mean, it's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people that come out for 2 days to see what our Air Force and our military is. It's awesome if you've never been.
Yeah, and people come from all over the country just to go to this air show, and it's definitely something to see. So when's the next one going to be taking place?
Again, I believe it's March 24th and 25th. Yep. And what I would, again, now there's sponsorship opportunities for this air show like there have never been in the past. So again, I will encourage those businesses who love to sponsor the Waste Management Phoenix Open when it rolls in and loves to sponsor the Super Bowl when it rolls in. You definitely want to sponsor the air show. It is an awesome event to be a part of. It provides incredibly unique access for you and your organizational constituents. So definitely reach out to us through our website, and I will get you in contact, and we can set up those opportunities to be an in-depth part of an air show.
That's great to know. And there's so many different aerospace and defense companies that are located just here in our own backyard. So I'm sure that would be a great opportunity for them, or any other business that cares about corporate social responsibility or even attracting and retaining, former military individuals. So thank you for sharing more information on that. And I do encourage people to take a further look at, how they can get further involved with that program. So tell us, I'm sure there's so much information that I'm sure a lot of us don't know about Luke Air Force Base. What are a couple different things that really catches people off guard or they're surprised to hear?
The international impact. I love talking about the global worth that Luke Air Force Base is. A lot of people like to, if you live in the East Valley, you might just go, oh, it's a West Valley asset. And if you live in Tucson, you go, oh, it's a Maricopa County asset. And when you tell people what Luke Air Force Base is, they clearly understand when I'm talking about how it's not a West Valley asset, it's not a Maricopa County asset, it's not a state asset, it's not a national asset. It is a global asset because the international partners that are training out there, who they're training first is F-35 and F-16 pilots. But if you understand where they're going and where these aircraft are flying, and you're talking about the national global defense for freedom and justice. You got the South Koreans training out there. You have Singaporeans training out there. You have Norwegians training out there. You have Netherlands training out there. You have the Australians training out there. You have the Japanese that have trained out there. You have the Israelis that have trained out there. I mean, it is an Epcot center to train the world's greatest F-35 pilots. And think about where those F-35s are flying. They're flying over areas where having knowledge as to what's going on the ground is pretty important. So it is a global asset that it's fun to tell people about because they're like, wow, I had no idea. And then what we get to do inside the fence is the things that we're doing that are supporting those families is also supporting those international families too. So for all of you listeners on a podcast, if you're a company in Denmark, if you want to support us, hey, you have a reason to support us because we're training your Danish F-35 pilots. So come on, support. We'll take support anywhere.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people don't actually know that.
We're not just a West Valley nonprofit. Our nonprofit has global importance.
So Fighter Country Partnership is something very unique, and you don't see that associated with a lot of other Air Force bases throughout the country. How was it established in the first place?
So I mentioned earlier too. It's our board members and our people in our Blue Blazer Squadron members like you. It's we are humbled every day about what we get to do, and there's not other Americans that get to do what we do in other areas of the country because those relationships don't exist. The reason why it's so successful at Luke is because Luke has a community initiatives team office that's headed up by a gentleman by the name of Rusty Mitchell, and because that office exists, there is a continuity piece that can help maintain relationships outside the fence, working closely with public affairs and protocol and wing leadership. Combine that with an honorary commander program, that engagement between Luke Air Force Base and the community is incredibly strong. And we, as the nonprofit, are kind of that belly button or that conduit for that communication and those relationships. And that's what other bases don't have. And it's funny is Rusty and I will travel across the country. We just got back from Missouri, and we've gone to Wisconsin in the past. We've gone to other installations to try and share the gospel as to how we support the base. And we'll sit down with base leadership. And I won't interrupt a colonel. I'm civilian. I'm allowed to interrupt and save oxygen from people, but I won't interrupt a colonel. So he'll talk 15 to 20 minutes as to why he's concerned and puzzled as to how the community doesn't support him better and why it's so good for us. And then when he's done, I'll go, well, sir, it's actually your fault. And he'll sit back in his chair and go, what? And I go, well, here's what they do at Luke, and here's why Luke is so successful. And because of that first, it leads to our success.
No, that's really neat. So when you're talking with other executives here in town, and they're looking to get further engaged, or they have the opportunity to become an honorary commander, what else are they exposed to through that process? What do they get to see as an honorary commander?
So I mentioned the morale and well-being and the mission sustainability piece. What you get exposed to as honorary commander is the culture and tradition. And that's the piece that as involved and educated Americans, if you're not involved and educated about the military from inside the fence, not from what you read, but being a part of it, that's what makes everything different. Getting involved in that culture and tradition, going to annual awards events, Air Force balls, roll calls if you're in a fighter squadron like you were lucky enough to be, or everything from promotion ceremonies, retirement ceremonies. You see the culture and tradition that's been around for more than decades, but it's awesome.
A lot of people, I'm sure, ask you, what does it take to get an F-16 flight? How do you pick who actually gets an F-16 flight?
You don't. And we are never a part of that conversation. And we get asked all the time, and it's always uncomfortable. And sometimes it's from someone who hasn't even ever been involved with the base, and they're seeking an F-16 flight. And I really don't like it when people ask me for things like that.
Sure.
If you are an involved individual, and you have become educated about what Luke Air Force Base is, and you're highly supportive of the base, then one day you might see an invitation on Department of Air Force letterhead inviting you for an incentive flight inside an F-16. And it's only because that individual has become actively involved and incredibly supportive of the base. It's not because of who they are and how much money they make. It's a matter of fact, it's further from that.
One thing I was really that I found a lot of interest in learning was that when I was talking to some other family members that their spouse had been, they've been a fighter pilot for a number of years, how many of them have never even sat in a fighter jet before. So that's actually really common. And most people go their entire lives, whether their spouses are committed to the Air Force for 5, 10, 20 years, without even having that opportunity. So it is an honor and a privilege to definitely have that opportunity. You've had an F-16 flight before.
I have, yes.
Can you maybe share what that experience is like?
I mean, I was up in an F-16 for, I believe, 1 hour and 7 minutes, of which I remember 7 of it because it went so fast. Personally, I handled it great, which was awesome. I didn't have any issues of getting sick or passing out, so I had an absolute blast. That's just it was over. Gosh, it was 10 years ago.
10 years ago. Oh my goodness. And how long have you been with Fighter Country Partnership?
It'll be 9 years in September, but I was a massively active honorary commander, hyperactive. So I include those 2 years. So almost 11 years I've been involved with the base.
And what kind of individuals are actively involved with the base today? Are there companies?
It's an eclectic.
Yeah.
The purpose of the honorary commander program is to do their best to identify a like position with like position. So if you're a security forces commander, we're gonna try and identify and give individuals for public affairs in the CIT office to select from police chiefs and individuals like that. If you're a dental squadron, we're going to try and identify a dentist or an orthodontist or something like that. If you're municipal staff, we'll try and place you somewhere within the mission support group, which is your resources, and your mission support group is kind of like your city manager. One thing that's also important to highlight is the honorary commander program at Luke. Elected officials are not allowed to participate, and also prior military for the most part, because the whole purpose of the honorary commander program is to simply reciprocate cultures. It's to get those individuals from outside the fence introduced to those individuals inside the fence in those leadership capacities, in those leadership roles that they have, and simply reciprocate. Because while the civilian culture and the military culture are both awesome in their own rights, they are so different.
So when you're meeting with other executives and they're trying to further understand, involvement or what they could do on a personal level, looking at your website would be a great resource for them. What other resources are out there, or who should they get in contact with?
So, I'm trying to think. I mean, I don't want to say that we're the only one, but I mean, it's again, we have grown to become the belly button and conduit for resources and communication into the base. And the base is also very good with their elected officials, too. Luke has what's called the Luke West Valley Council that meets bi-monthly or quarterly, and it's all the West Valley mayors and the county supervisor in the area, in that district, staffers from our D.C. delegations and districts and representatives, all that stuff. So the base is very good at communicating with those individuals. So all of our elected officials have a firm, deep understanding as to the importance of Luke. So you can always get great information from our elected officials about what's going on at Luke and how to be involved there. So that's one area where if you have good relationships with your electeds, stay in communication with them. And then we're that other conduit.
So another question I had for you was, I mean, I know you work with so many different families. Have you been able to quantify how the impact that Fighter Country Partnership has had on families involved with Luke Air Force Base?
So the quant number in numbers is off the charts. I mean, it's thousands over the course of the year, depending upon what the programs are. And qualifying it is simply just the feedback you get from the family. Like, yeah, last night was awesome. And then you take the feedback from senior leadership, and that's really where it all comes down to. When you see how senior leadership appreciates what you're doing, then you just need to keep doing it.
You bet. What are some of your most favorite stories, or what are the ones that have impacted you the most throughout your time with Fighter Country Partnership?
So the fire station is the first and foremost, because when we had grown to the point where we needed to expand our scope of work, and we brought this initiative to our board of directors, they kind of looked at me like, what? I'm like, well, the YMCA does capital campaigns, the Boys and Girls Club, the Phoenix Zoo, the Arizona Science Center. Why can't we? Just because we're a small nonprofit doesn't mean we can't do it. So educating them as to where some of those deeper needs were and getting them to buy in. And they're like, yeah, let's do this. So then we went to the Air Force and said, hey, we want to renovate your fire station. So we submitted what's called an offer of gift. It took the Air Force 8 months to say yes, because they had never seen anything like it before. Some of their questions are like, well, what do you want out of it? Nothing. Why are you doing this? Because we want to. So it set a precedent that they had never seen before. So there was no process on the back end to approve it.
Mm-hmm.
So it took them 8 months just to simply say, okay, come on in and renovate our fire station. So that was a huge home run for us. The license plate was awesome. That was just simply because I was behind a Coyotes Foundation license plate one day, and we have a great relationship with our Arizona Coyotes, and I went, well, how come we don't have one? So that was a huge endeavor. That was awesome to accomplish. And then the programs and services that we're providing. I came from a YMCA background where our role was to provide community support and community programs for City of Avondale, City of Goodyear, and City of Litchfield Park. And we were very good at it. And so when I got over to Luke Air Force Base, and good, bad, or indifferent, the military sometimes is very institutionalized in their ways. So when I had access to some of these resources outside the fence, and I could bring them inside the fence, and we had that relationship of trust already to the point where the base trusts us, now these programs, the programs that we're providing, aren't being provided anywhere else in the country. So
You've helped with a lot of huge initiatives in collaboration between Fighter Country Partnership and Luke Air Force Base. But I also think just the time and the energy that you put towards helping individuals and or families. Can you maybe share how you kind of personalize or really help those individuals in a time of need?
So the individuals is an area where we support the base through what's called the Luke Airman's Fund. So we make sure the Luke Airman's Fund has resources for those situations. Because when it gets down to individual need, we want to be supportive completely, but we allow leadership to handle those situations. So those individuals, like if a staff sergeant's wife has cancer and they have 5 kids, that's a tough situation. So we want to make sure that there's support for those families, but we allow the leadership at Luke Air Force Base to handle those situations. We support demographics out at the base. So if it's a monthly deployed function, there might be 80 families that, on average, there's about 150 to 200 individuals deployed at Luke Air Force Base. So we might fund and support monthly deployed family function at the Wildlife World Zoo. And so 80 families might sign up for that. And not to stereotype, but it's typically mom and the kids, right? Dad's deployed, or mom's deployed, and dad or mom will bring the kids to the Wildlife World Zoo. And so we'll fund that, and we get to do that multiple times throughout the year. So those are great. We also support an annual dorm dweller holiday party. And again, this is another one of those sensitive areas where the reason why we provide those types of programs, like that deployed family function or this dorm dweller holiday program, it's for a positive distraction. And the things that we don't like to talk about, the military doesn't like to talk about, but it's no secret, is, the suicides that exist in the military. And a lot of the times in those dorms, there's 573 dorm rooms out at Luke Air Force Base. And during the holidays, if it's a young airman who's first time away from home and they're stuck away from home and they're going through a tough time, that's why we started that event. And we've been doing that for, almost 8 years now. So that's how we support the airmen and the Navy and the Marines on the base is through demographics. So that's how we do it.
Well, I want to thank you again for all that you do, both for the airmen and for our community. You've definitely had a huge impact on a lot of individuals. With closing, is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners as we wrap up this conversation?
I encourage them to get on the website. Again, it's fightercountry.org. Right when you hop on the website, there's a video. We have a great partnership with Lane Terralever, and they helped us produce this video. Watch it and share it. And then get involved in whatever capacity you can. We appreciate financial support. There's that shameless plug always, right? But understand that when you're supporting us, you're supporting an organization that is unlike any other organization in the country, and you should be proud that you're doing it.
So aside from your website, do you guys have any social handles that people can follow you on?
Those are things that we should improve on. Obviously, we have Facebook and we have Twitter, and we need to get better at that.
All good. I just want to make sure that we're providing all platforms for people to be able to find you and to learn more about all the great initiatives that you're working on. So, Ron, thank you again for joining me today. Really appreciate your time.
All right. Thank you very much. We appreciate it too.